Thank you for doing this. I really appreciate your time today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
So in Davos the other day, George Soros said that he thought your dad was a danger to the world and will disappear in 2020 or even sooner. What did you think of George Soros?
Well, I'd say many would say the same about George Soros. I mean, I don't know that anyone has spent more money actively, combating the democratic process and fighting that. I mean, he spent more money lobbying against anything that my father's done than he has probably in history, on other things. So, he can say whatever he wants, but, the fact remains he's the one trying to undermine the duly elected president of the United States. If George wants to run, he should. Maybe step in the ring. Don't just fund it with billions from the side. And we all know how he made that money. So, I don't know that anyone should be listening to George Soros.
What do you think about the left's efforts to frame your dad and anyone who supports your dad as a hater, as a racist, as a fascist? This is a cultural phenomenon, and there's fear spreading across the country of being able to say what you really believe.
Well, I think it's terrible for a couple of reasons. I said this on the campaign trail when it was so obvious. That was sort of the game plan. We're going to smear you with racist, fascist, whatever. The real problem is those things exist. Certainly racism exists. But if it's your response to any argument you can't win, you actually do a real disservice to those people actually afflicted by it, to those people who are actually oppressed and hurt by real racism, by real sexism. So if you use it every time, what really happens is, and in the real world what really happens is people hear it, they roll their eyes, and they move on. Because they realize it's nonsense in this case. The problem is when people who are actually affected by it say it doesn't matter anymore. It's lost its effect because it's been numbing to people. You can only overplay your hand so many times before people start calling your bluff. So it's actually doing nothing on the positive side of being able to promote that as a real issue. And what it's doing on the other side is it's hurting those that are actually afflicted by it. So it's been terrible to watch because I know him. I've seen him my whole life. I've seen the things he's done. It's amazing. All the rappers, all the this, all his African-American friends, from Jesse Jackson to Al Sharpton. I have pictures with him the whole life. We say, hi, I've always been friends. It was only till he got into politics that all of a sudden, oh, he's the most terrible human being. I don't know. He wasn't so terrible a couple years ago when you're at his events. He wasn't so terrible then when you're hitting him up for charity dollars and he's sponsoring things and sponsoring scholarships and doing X, Y, Z for you guys. That wasn't a problem. But now all of a sudden you're a conservative, so we must take this stance. Again, it's another backfire. You can only do so much before people start to see through the nonsense.
Talk about the obvious press bias. Again, when you see what they were like with President Obama and the lobbing softballs to him versus what happens when your dad hits the press.
The media and the mainstream media has become so dishonest, so flagrant. I mean, the best part, I really enjoyed watching the best 90 minutes of television I've ever seen. It was 10 days ago during the health report when they're questioning the rear admiral who happened to be appointed by Obama, who gave my father his physical. And they went on for, I think it was 94 minutes, just trying. Okay, you just said he's really, really healthy, but, I felt like I was watching Dumb and Dumber. It's like, 1 in a million, so you're saying there's a chance. They're just trying to latch on to anything to be able to attack him. No one questioned Obama about his smoking, about this, about whatever it may be.
Drug use.
Well, I don't know if he was doing that then, but certainly he was a smoker, which has as much, a contributing, is as much a contributing factor to heart disease and these sort of things. But why? It wasn't because he's a tall, skinny guy with no muscle mass. Like, that's also not so healthy. So, you watch these things, and again, I think real people see right through it, and I guess that's all that matters. It's amazing. It's the bias is so palpable. It's disgusting. It's and they don't even get it. They're like, wait a minute, he's actually fighting back. Well, you guys never asked a hard question in 8 years. You think that everyone was like, hey, we're just gonna boost this guy to the top. We're gonna whatever he wants to say. He can do no wrong. He can say no wrong. Facts don't matter. So you have someone that's gonna fight back. You have someone that'll frankly bypass the media, play a great game of monkey in the middle with them using Twitter, because the way they'll take his message and distort it by the time they play 1 degree of telephone game, they're saying whatever they want. It's not grounded in any reality. So, it's been interesting. So Twitter is going to be his downfall. He shouldn't be using it. They're covering it all the time. I mean, they can't make up their minds. You see it, and it's sad because, and it's actually forcing people to sort of other routes. I think it's why social has become such a big platform. I think, frankly, both good and bad. I mean, I think it's driven people to some people who don't necessarily have a TV-sized soapbox. But I think there's also plenty of people on the fringe and some of those things that people are going there for their news, both left and right, on the extreme ends, that it's bad. We've actually gotten to the point now where they've given up even trying to pretend that they're not biased. They've just literally just thrown it out the window. It's funny to watch because, when we first got into this process 2 years ago, it's like, wait a minute, that guy actually said something that was almost in favor. Now, that was probably because they were told, hey, boost Trump a little bit because there's no way he can win. We want him to take out the others. Look what it got him. But they've all been working together, right? Whether it's the debate questions, being leaked to they've picked a pony. That pony was Hillary Clinton, or frankly, whoever the left puts up. It doesn't matter. And that's the anointed one, and we will push them and do whatever it takes to make sure that person wins. In the meantime, they've shot their credibility, in the foot, and they've lost it. And I don't think you get it back. The American public is much smarter than the media would ever give them credit for, and they see right through it.
So talk about what's going on and why your dad connected with the real American people. And he has that wingspan of being able to be with the successful and the mainstream America.
Well, no, it was amazing. I mean, obviously coming in the heels of Davos, the media narrative last week was not a single wealthy, that no one's going to they're going to boycott Trump. Meanwhile, there's lines of billionaires, waiting outside of the room to be able to hear him speak for hours. He's always been able to do that way. I mean, because he's a builder. Right? That's what he does. So he didn't get good at building by listening to an executive behind a glass door at an office. He did it by being on the ground, by talking to real people, the guys actually doing the real work. I spoke about it at my convention speech last year. I mean, that's what he did. That's what made him better, is because he got the real information. Not people telling him what he wanted to hear, but real guys, actually doing the work, saying, hey, if you did this a little bit different. So he's always been able to relate that way. I joked, years ago, I used to get criticized for him. I called him sort of the blue-collar billionaire, because that's sort of the way he is. He's able to relate to those guys. He's able to have fun with them. He's made so many of them succeed within his organization who any other executive of his level would have never even given them a chance. They got that promotion because they were good, because they were smart, because they had street smarts about them, because they worked harder, not because they had some sort of acronym behind, some sort of fancy college degree. They just did better work than someone else. Most people in that same position would have been passed over, but he just has a history of doing this. So I think he was able to relate, to that working class guy very well. And that's the way he speaks. It's the way he interacts. He's willing to say the things that probably everyone's thinking, but so few are willing to verbalize it.
If you walk through Arlington Cemetery, and you just, all the crap in this town that comes at people, and they think it's games, but it's not a game.
After winning the campaign, it was such a long fight and so hard, and just every day, it's sort of the frequency of, up-down emotion. Even when we won, it was like, wait a minute, they're going to play a game. There's some sort of trick up their sleeve. I couldn't even enjoy it, but you mentioned Arlington because that's when it hit me. 2 months later, going to the wreath-laying ceremony at Arlington, the magnitude and the gravity of everything that had just transpired, and sort of it was emotionally overwhelming. And I think, for the American people, I think they get it. They see it. And I said it, they see someone fighting for them. Now, we are fighting hamstrung. We are fighting with one arm tied behind our back, not because that's the way we fight, but because there are a lot more forces making it a lot harder for us. But what I know about my father is that he is a fighter. He doesn't quit. He doesn't give up. Everyone saw that on the campaign trail. Okay? He outworked them to death. If she did one event, 2 events a day, 2 events a day was a major feat. He was doing 5, 6, 7 events in a day, not including everything in between, but full-time speeches. They see his energy. They see his passion. He is the last person in this country that needed this job. He didn't need to do this. He wanted to do this because he's seen it. He's seen it firsthand. He's been the recipient from both sides and the request. He understands exactly how this system works. And he wants to fix it because he realizes that it's been broken. We've gone down the wrong path for way too long. And he's the guy that can right that ship. So, I do see it. I mean, I see it with You know, the people who supported us are still 100% there, but more importantly, the people who weren't sure. You know, they weren't sure because maybe they didn't like the way he verbalized something, or they didn't like perhaps the approach. You know what? But in the end, Americans are results driven. And you know what? Sometimes, you know, you'd love to be able to sweet talk something, but sometimes you actually have to break out the sledgehammer and sort of push it through and make sure you hit hard so people get it. And we have to do that because we're not on equal footing. We're not on equal ground because we can't get our message out the same way. It'll be manipulated, it'll be shredded, we won't have that same benefit of the doubt. You know, Obama could say and do anything, and it didn't matter. They would take the message and be like, hey, give us the talkers, and it's perfect. He didn't have to do anything. We have to work a lot harder to get, you know, even remotely close to the same. But again, he's been able to do that, and the results are going to speak for themselves. The results are speaking for themselves in the economy. The results are speaking for themselves in the unemployment numbers. Certainly, you know, amongst minorities, you know, people are going to get it, and people vote with their heads in the end. They're going to vote with, you know, what has happened here? Any other president, he was a Democratic president, again, unprecedented. This has never been done before. Hey, some of the big, you know, conservative, never Trump organizations are saying, hey, by the numbers, he's doing better than Reagan in year one. I mean, that's pretty impressive when you think about coming from no political, you know, actual political experience, to be able to take on that challenge, to be able to step in there and do that. You know, that's part of why they're fighting so hard against us. They don't want others to think, wait a minute, I don't have to be born into this system and raised through it and, you know, be tied in with the lobbyists and all the groups that have made billions, you know, on the backs of hardworking Americans around the D.C. area. I mean, he's been able to do that for real American people. You know, I remember, you know, 4 or 5 years ago when Obama, there was a $40 rebate that people were going to get. That was a big deal. But today, when companies are giving thousands of dollars of bonuses, it's petty cash, according to Nancy Pelosi and Debbie Wasserman Schultz. You know, it's only petty cash compared to the money that they paid their IT people before they had to flee the country, right? That's the difference. That double standard can no longer fly, and it doesn't. But it only doesn't fly because this is the first time we've had someone in conservative leadership who will actually call them out, who will actually fight back and not just take it on the chin and turn around and walk away head hunched over. You have someone who has the guts to fight back. And that's what he is. He's a counterpuncher. He'll get along with everyone. But you're not going to walk all over him without a fight. And people have seen that, and they've learned it the hard way. We have the chance to really drain the swamp. And the swamp has teeth. They will fight back. They will not make it easy. They have made a lot of money and very good livings, you know, pretending that this is rocket science, that you need them, that this is all that complicated. But in all it really is, it's a big friend network. Everyone worked for someone else at one point in time, and everyone's made a lot of money through the system, and everyone passes around. The only people that are totally forgotten about are their constituents, their workers, right? Someone goes from Senate, they become a lobbyist, they go back, they make a lot of money. It's why the DC zip codes are the richest in the country. They don't produce anything. They don't make anything. All they do is peddle influence. Okay? We saw it with the Clintons and the Clinton Foundation. That's where we're different. That's where we're different. He's doing this not because he has to. Okay, look at his administration. Look at his cabinet. Okay, the prior administration, every cabinet head, that was the best job that person ever had. For this cabinet, these are people stepping out from making hundreds of millions of dollars, running industry to take on the headache that's going to come with the attacks that they're going to face. I mean, this is, in many respects, the worst job they've ever had. And yet they want to do it because they believe in him, they believe in the message, and they know they can actually make a difference, that they can impart all this change that we hear about every election cycle, where we're going to do it differently. There's never been any change. It's all the same. My father's the first change that's happened to government in a long time. And that's why all these people went all in assuming he wasn't going to win. Because how could someone from the outside ever break into our little system, our little cabal? He did it. And he's going to make a big difference for those people and for everyone in this country. And it's really important. And as the father of 5 young kids, it means a lot to me to be able to see it, because it means they'll have a chance to see the America that I grew up in. And I think that's important, and I think we're losing it fast if we don't keep focusing on this.
So as we film, the Republicans in the House Intelligence Committee are getting ready to vote, and I don't know how that's going to turn out, but assuming they expose the misdeeds of the FBI and senior Justice Department people, do you think that has the possibility of changing the trajectory of the Mueller investigation?
You know, you would think it would. You would think that if you found out the game was that rigged, if that's what happens, you would think that it would, but I don't think it will. Because again, I mean, you know, whether it's, you know, the deep state, and I was never a conspiracy theorist about these sort of things, but you look at it and you almost can't help but think, wait a second, you have no chance in this thing. When you look at a team comprised entirely of Democratic donors, I mean, there's Republican lawyers out there. You could have had one of them, maybe even two, but you have a team of 16, you know, all of whom are basically, you know, saying negative things, whether it's the texts or, I mean, you can't help but think it's a witch hunt. I mean, to me, as far as I've seen, now I'm only 40, but in my lifetime, it's the greatest witch hunt I've ever seen, and probably the greatest witch hunt since Salem. It's crazy, and it keeps going on, and I think it keeps going on because, again, the media had staked their entire credibility on the fact that this has to be true, it has to be real. So we're going to do whatever it takes to make it so, and I think it's given them leeway that they would never get with anyone else. If it was anyone other than my father, even a conservative other than my father, they'd be held to a different standard. But a guy like my father, who's not afraid to fight back, who's not afraid to take on, he's just held to a very different and much more stringent standard than anyone else in D.C. But you know what? I think it's great because the American people have to see it. The American people have to see it. And so they're taking the most powerful man in the world, and you're making him the underdog. And people are fed up with it. I see it all over the place. It's great. I was actually on the floor of the SHOT Show last week in Las Vegas, and I had no less than 10 retired FBI agents come up to me and say, tell your father to keep going. Because there is a distinction between the boots and the suits. You know, the guys actually doing the work, the guys that are real law enforcement. It's a very distinct group than the lawyers that occupy the 7th floor. And that's what I think people don't see. You know, those guys, the boots, the guys doing the hard work, the guys actually in law enforcement, those guys love what's going on in terms of what my father is doing, the transparency he's creating, fighting back against that system. They think the people who've actually tarnished, you know, their badge, even as retirees, are the people in charge of the FBI, and they're sick of it. So it was great to actually hear that because, you know, that's been his message all along about law enforcement. Now the media, you see them conveniently for the first time ever. They're defending law enforcement. They're not defending actual law enforcement, you know, officers. They're defending 5 guys at the top of the FBI. But it's nice to see them defend law enforcement at least once in my lifetime.
So thanks for tweeting our interview with Joe DeGenova. In my interview with Joe, he talks about the kind of the exceptional rules that Hillary Clinton had when she was interviewed by the FBI. So I was wondering if you think your dad, if he has to talk with Special Counsel Mueller, if he could ask for the same kinds of things, whether it's none of the regular rules, every break in the book, immunized a lot of people, no grand jury, no subpoenas, allow the destruction of evidence. Do you think your dad's going to be treated the way that Hillary Clinton was?
I doubt it. You know, and the reason I say that is just I can use myself as an example. When you talk about sort of the Russia collusion, you know, nonsense, you know, the media and the left has made this thing to be a thing for 2 years. They swear by it, it's the truth, this had to happen, so much so that they need it to be true. They've risked their entire credibility. Their entire narrative for almost 2 years now has been, this is fact. What's great about what I went through is 25 hours of, you know, testimony in front of these committees, you know, hundreds of hours of preparation, getting dragged through the mud. What was great about it now was that the only thing they discovered was all this other stuff that was actually going on the other side. You know, when you think about me, I took a 20-minute meeting. Hillary Clinton did 11 hours of testimony when she was Secretary of State after Benghazi, where she lied to the American public, said that it was about a video where 4 people, great Americans, died, including our ambassador. I took a 20-minute meeting, and I did more than double the amount of testimony that she had. I mean, that's the double standard. So, you know, I think my father should ask for those things. I think he should listen to his counsel, but he'll never be afforded the same things that she was because it's a different set of rules for someone outside of the system, and it's an especially different set of rules for someone like him, who's just, you know, been so different than the typical conformist, especially being a conservative.
So some think that the Mueller investigation is nothing more than the second to last act for a coup against President Trump so that the left can continue their transformation of America. What do you think?
Listen, I don't know if it's that, but it's clearly, to me, it's clearly a way to undermine something that they couldn't fathom, something that they couldn't understand. We saw it very early. We saw it going to middle America. We saw it in the enthusiasm gap on the campaign trail. It was incredible. I say, wait a minute, it's February in New Hampshire. It's 0 degrees out, and there's people waiting outside for 5 hours to hear a politician speak. It was unprecedented. When I would go speak in parts of middle America, I used to be like, you sure they know it's junior, not senior? You know that, because I don't want to get sued for misrepresentation here. Because I was drawing more than sometimes the candidate on the other side. And people saw it because the greatest irony of all is that the brash billionaire from New York was actually able to speak to and speak with middle America, the hardworking men and women who built this country, as opposed to, like Hillary. She's very good at speaking at people, lecturing them. And so, that they couldn't see that, and they still don't get it. They still don't know how it could have happened, that they have to come up with every possible crazy theory as to how, Donald Trump was able to beat the anointed one. Instead of just saying, wait a minute, she's probably the worst candidate in modern times in terms of put up, right? It was probably the greatest campaign because they had more money than anyone, better teams, quote unquote professionals that knew everything. But they didn't see what was actually going on, and they had no way of relating because in their own little bubble, they'd never broken from it, and they couldn't because they frankly don't respect anyone outside of that bubble. So, even a year later, they still have no idea what's going on, and it's great to watch. They went so all in. They needed this to be true because this was 18 months of narrative. This explained everything. They needed it to be true. So they banked their entire credibility. They went all in. So they keep investigating because they know it has to be there. And the only things they're turning up are all the things the other side did. How many investigations have there been on Uranium One? Bill's speaking, all of these, incredible coincidences, that we keep hearing about and reading about. So what's been great about, despite, millions in legal fees, thousands of wasted hours, all this stuff that we've had to put up with, what's been great is the only thing they've discovered is what they were actually doing. And it's, there's a great element, little vengeful perhaps, but, there's a great element. I go home and I just sit there and watch this stuff and I'm laughing about it because all they had to do was accept the results. They could have moved on, but now you're actually uncovering what appear to be some pretty serious plots that would never fly in this country before the prior administration essentially, seemingly, weaponized the FBI and the DOJ against the duly elected president of this country. If that happened in other parts of the world, third world nations, we'd be shocked. But it's happening here. And, I really hope we get to the bottom of it fast.
So there's this blogger, Daniel Greenfield, Sultan Kanish, who explains the two sets of rules that America is going through right now for our side and the other side. And he says guns are how a civil war ends, politics is how it starts. And he says we're in a civil war and the left doesn't want to secede, it wants to rule. And he talks about how the left decides which authority based on where they have power. So Republicans win a presidential election and it's not legitimate and it's to be resisted. It rejects the judicial authority when its decisions don't accord with its agenda. It rejects the legislative authority when it's not controlling the outcome. Under Obama, they were for total executive authority. Now the left is for states determining whether they're going to decide on what laws to present. So what do you think of this idea that we're in a civil war that this guy is talking about?
Well, I think there certainly is. There's an attack on free speech. There's an attack on the Second Amendment. These are basic tenets of our Constitution. We've seen it where, the other majority party is taking illegal aliens, people who don't belong in this country, legally, how we feel emotionally or not is not so relevant, but they're taking that stance over the men and women of our military, over children's insurance, over American citizens, and that's who they're choosing to back. The double standard is insane. I said it earlier. It's do as I say, not as I do. And it's easier to get away with that when you have a media that's totally complicit in there. If you had a media that was 50-50, fine, I can understand. You're going to take a side. But when you have a media that's 95-5, in favor of their agenda, you can do all of these things. That said, I think what's unique and great about my father is he's able to call people out. The great thing about sort of the DACA, fold last week wasn't that we won. It's that it's the first time the Republicans just didn't give up and like roll over and die. They're invigorated because they're like, wait a minute, we have someone that will have our backs. That's the legislators. But more importantly, I think as a people, Americans are seeing, wait a minute, we have someone that has our back. You see it in the economy. I mean, it's not coincidence, despite, it's Obama's policies that started on November 9th after the election that started this great, largest single year gain in the history of the Dow. 80-something records. All of these things, that didn't happen because of those policies. It happened because people, businesses, big and small, everyone believes there's someone actually fighting for them. Someone that's not just going to throw on arbitrary regulations to put some bureaucrat in power, but they're going to say, I want you to decide what you're going to do with your money. I mean, that's what's amazing. The Democrats are so resistant to letting the American people spend and use their own money. I mean, they would rather give you $1,000 of government programs that they control because they want to own you, your thought process, your speech process. They want that control. My father wants to let you make that decision. Okay, let the free markets decide. That's what he's done. The other party's platform is almost like Americans. Who cares about them? I mean, why would we ever even think about caring about our constituents? It's crazy. So they see through all that, and it's been great to watch.
So how are you finding the DC social scene?
I have no idea. I'm not at all in it, nor do I try to be. I'm able to stay away from it. I'm not in the administration. I've run the business, but at the same time, you get the political bug. I mean, you're the tip of the spear on a campaign that, for no real reason, but was probably the greatest upset in political history. Not because of reality, but because of the message that was out there. When you think, she was the anointed one. This was her destiny for 40 years. For me, it was hard to sort of get a taste for that. And then, hey, go back to doing what you're doing for 15 years because I believe so much in what he's doing. I fight for what I believe in. I have perhaps a little bit of my father's gene for that. It's been great. So I'm not involved at all in the DC circle. But what's great is because of my hobbies, I'm a big outdoorsman. I'm a big shooter. I actually spend time in other parts of the country other than sort of the New York, DC, LA bubbles that everyone's living in. I see these people. I have friends that are regular guys that make, median wage or less. And, you see how it affects them, and it's amazing. And to be able to fight for those things that affect those people, even from the outside, is still amazing. So, frankly, as far as I'm concerned, it's the best thing I can do with my time right now.